Hello, so I'm Ross Domoney. I'm a freelance video journalist and documentary maker.
And I'm Antonis Vradis. I'm an academic geographer.
As a filmmaker, I freelance for the Real News Network, making reports from the UK and Palestine. Over the last year, the reports made by my small team have gained millions of views on YouTube. Aside from my freelance work with the Real News, Antonis and I have collaborated on independent projects for over a decade.
And yeah, we've worked together a fair few times on projects, right? As academic, filmmaker, duo.
We really have.
Recently, we were in the West Bank of Palestine, and we got caught up in the most destructive Israeli army raid since the Second Intifada. Let's show you a clip. Moments later, the resistance fighters set off the air raid alarm. The much anticipated raid on Noor Shams has begun. Those who can, flee for their lives. So why are we making this video here today? Because as the Israeli war machine's destruction continues, we have embarked on an independent film project to capture Palestinian memory as a form of resistance. We need your help to tell this story. Check out our trailer.
How far back do you remember?
غمض عيونك.
كل الذكريات حلوة.
What historic event have you lived through?
بحلم اني انا ما عدتش انا يعود اولادي واحفادي.
Palestinians carry generations of memory.
بس بقول يعني طلع على البحر عليها شجر كثير.
Palestine is facing the erasure of past, present and future. Support this independent documentary and help keep these memories alive.
We made some lifelong friends in Palestine and shared some tough nights together. Now we need to raise money to cover the post-production costs of our independent film so that we can start the editing.
Maybe it would be nice to give some kind of background to this wider project, right? Because the trip that we just made to Palestine, which we'll get to in a moment, is in a way, the way we envisage it is part of something much bigger.
So yeah, we come back and forward with it, but Antonis and I were always very interested in filming political struggles all over the world. We started off when we were a bit younger, of course, being super into riots and uprisings. But then in a way, I think we found that language, that film language, was a little bit restricting. And we were kind of doing video journalism work related to these political struggles, but we wanted to find a language that was more kind of otherworldly, so you would understand the politics of cities in conflicts and political turmoil, but we wanted to find a new filmmaking language.
Shit, so where should I start? Just tell you my dream?
It was a nightmare. I can't even remember. I have nightmares every night. Which one?
Yo he soñado siempre me sueño con muchas cosas.
We're inspired by dreams, right? And I think I remember telling you I had read an article, someone had tried something similar many years ago. And we realized, I think, that a lot of the messages that we wanted to convey or that a more conventional documentary would convey, or even a political kind of like film, it is possible to get this kind of sense, this kind of like feeling, and this political message and much more through the language of dreams.
The concept of a dream is for Trump to come in as president of the United States tomorrow.
Le dernier rêve que j'ai fait, c'était un cauchemar. Et c'était l'élection de Marine Le Pen en France.
Et donc, j'allais voir une certaine candidate, voilà, et je lui foutais mon poing dans la gueule, en fait. Et voilà, puis ça m'a soulagée.
It can reveal so much about your individual state, of being, of course, but much more so than, I think, the collective one, right?
Totally, and then we kind of hit it also with like a geographer's approach, didn't we? And we said, how can we confine this to one space? So we decided we'd stick to subway trains, like underground trains, metro systems. And then we just asked commuters again and again and again, what did you dream about in your sleep?
Мечтаю, чтобы не было войны.
So this brings us to the last few years, where it feels that the world is going more and more kind of like in an intense direction, socially, politically, psychologically, and there's more and more events. Like we started with Trump's inauguration, as you said, and then we realized that they keep happening. So the next one on was Ukraine, where we decided to go pretty much as soon as the war broke out, really.
The full-scale invasion, yeah.
The full-scale invasion.
Тут я відчуваю себе в безпеці.
The lights have been turned off, so this station cannot be seen by Russian bombers.
Мене не те, що мені до сих пір не віриться, що це все відбувається, це як страшний сон, але це реальність.
Police are on the hunt for saboteurs. Ukrainians travel above and underground by train as Russia tries to occupy their country.
Nadia.
Yeah, it's very difficult to untangle it, but exactly, fast forward to October 7th, and I think probably the moment it happened, and I do remember reading about it as it was developing as a story. I think probably a lot of us were in a similar situation. It became apparent quite early on that this was very big, that this was going to be a huge sort of like that the backlash that was going to kind of like take place would be enormous. And I remember getting messages from friends and family saying, hope you're not planning on going. But I think deep inside we were already, I was already thinking that there has to be a way to go out there. But with Palestine and with everything that's been happening since, with this terrible, unfathomable genocide, it felt like the stakes were so much higher, for me at least, and I think we share that sentiment, right? That it was so important to try and go there and do justice to the people, to their struggle, to what's happening, to what they're going through. So in a way, maybe at least I felt that for a while I was kind of like, I had cold feet about it, not because I didn't want to go, but because I wanted so much.
But yeah, I felt that huge pressure as well, and sensitivity and acceptance as well, that of course me and Antonis are outsiders and we're not Palestinian, and we totally accept that position, but we still wanted to go in and use our skills in the best way possible to tell a film that would hopefully be different and related to what we've kind of focused on in the past with these kind of subconscious worlds, and then it kind of changed into subconscious merged into things about memory as well with Palestine.
Well, there was a very practical problem, right, that we haven't really discussed much, but there's no trains in Palestine. So it would have been difficult to continue on that same thread, you know, and I don't think it ever came up in the conversations, but it's true. So the one vehicle that you've got, literally and metaphorically, to tell the story, you don't have it. So there were other elements that we needed to kind of like think as means of kind of like connecting these threads. And through the discussions, through the readings that we did, of course, memory is something that came up again and again.
So I guess this came from experience, right? That we decided to still try as much as possible and focus on like space and territory. And we accepted that we didn't have this train system as kind of a go-to film method with dreams. So then we decided that we'd stay in like an area, right? There was loads of coverage on Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank, which has a really strong armed Palestinian resistance. But then there was also stuff going on in Tulkarem refugee camp and Nur Shams, which is right next to Tulkarem refugee camp, which we felt was a little bit more kind of underreported. So we decided that we'd go stay in a hotel that was in between the two camps. We had like Tulkarem camp, maybe like, was it 200 meters to our left?
Yeah.
A little bit further.
Maybe a little bit further, yeah.
And then Nur Shams was really close, like 50, 100 meters to our right of the hotel. And we wanted to go with this memory concept, right?
No, one of the original ideas was that we would try to find either survivors of the Nakba, the Palestinian catastrophe of 1948, direct survivors, people who were there, obviously children. There could only have been children back then if they're still alive today, or their descendants, you know, family who have, you know, grandparents and parents who would have had, so either direct or indirect experience and memories of the Nakba. And we wanted to record them, to capture these memories, and to try and somehow integrate them into a documentary, also filming what these places look like today, because, you know, geographically they're still there, like as in they are spots on the map. You know, the places that they talk about physically, it would still be the same location that you can trace. But in terms of the landscape, we expected, and we're not wrong, that in most cases it would be completely different, right? It would have turned into a part of the Israeli state. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's quite, to use those words that you're not really allowed to use in Palestine, you say complicated, but I guess we have to explain the bigger context as well. So these camps like Jenin, Tulkarem, Nur Shams, where we were filming, they were camps set up by Palestinian refugees who were refugees from the Nakba in 1948. So they're native Palestinians who were forced to flee their lands when the Zionist militias created what is today known as the State of Israel. So they're refugees in their own land, and then they built up their own kind of structures, didn't they?
They really are part of the urban fabric. So it's quite interesting in that they're still called refugee camps, and people will call them the 1948 camps. So even in the name, the memory of the event is there, you know, in the everyday life of these camps. But even though they're called camps, they're not informal or temporary in terms of the structures, right? They are, as you're saying, they are, you know, bricks and mortar, and they're built in the same way as the rest of the city. They're denser, absolutely. They're some of the most densely populated places on earth, really. Incredibly dense and super narrow streets and alleyways.
And amongst these dense camps, there's a huge amount of solidarity between Palestinian residents, and there's also armed Palestinian groups that have had quite a new presence. I think it was Ahmad, the guy that helped us out a lot in Palestine, was saying that it's kind of a new phenomenon that's happened since 2021, was it? There has been different moments, of course, throughout the Palestinian struggle where there's been armed resistance movements, but now it's kind of turned into this thing that's a lot more wild, with different battalions and groups, normally quite brave young men, right, that don't necessarily cover their faces, and they have battalions with groups of their friends, and then the Israeli army makes incursions into the camps, kills the fighters, kills civilians, collectively punishes the camps for having the fighters inside the camps, tears up the roads, and then there's funerals afterwards, more people join up to join the brigades because they're all memories and traumas and friends that are lost, and it's just like a never-ending cycle of resistance.
Yeah, the people that have actually taken up arms are not, it's not that big a number, talking 40 or 50 in a population of thousands. But what's really striking is how much supported and respected they are from the camp residents as a whole, really. There's this incredibly wide kind of like network of support and admiration. It's a question of how do you do justice to the footage that you've got, but also to the story that you're trying to tell. And I think beyond any kind of like militaristic or kind of like narrative of, braveness, which of course there's a massive braveness involved there, there's something about the memory of the fighters that's even more, it's absolutely crucial. It's a crucial part of the thread of daily life and of how this community organizes and essentially defends itself. So it defends itself through memory, and memory in a way I keep thinking that memory is a weapon for the Palestinians, right? It's something that they're really holding on to, and it acts as a kind of a shield against these attacks. So there's memory in at least two levels I can think of. One of them is the memory of the fighters themselves. So many of them who we spoke to told us that they joined because of another fighter, a friend or a relative who died, was killed, and then that was the defining moment, the moment when they decided they needed to take up the fight, right? So it acts almost like a chain of the memory of loss that kind of then feeds into the continuation of this struggle, if that makes sense. That's how this memory chain is built. But also for the wider community, also they're held as heroes when they're alive, but even more so in a way after they're killed. They become martyrs. They become symbols, really, right? And you see them within a day. I think all of these posters had been put up in the camp with the photos of the most recent martyrs.
Yeah, it all happened so quickly, like it was almost an expected process. So someone would die, including people that we filmed, or a person that we filmed, and hours afterwards he was killed, and then kind of hours after that, or a day and a half after that, he was already immortalized on a poster, like a very well designed poster of him as a martyr, and his family were wearing him as a picture, like inside a necklace. And it was this kind of whole process and cycle, and it was all related to memory. And then of course there is the memory of the Nakba, and the memory of where all of these camp residents had initially and originally fled from. And I think that was also a narrative that the Palestinian resistance fighters were fighting for, right? It was to fight for the right to return back to their ancestral lands.
In a way, there's at least two sort of cycles of memory. So there's one very short, in the grand scheme of things, right? Very short, where it's like the life of a fighter. They decide to join. They're killed. They're martyred, and then someone else will take their place, right? That happens relatively fast in historical terms, because then there's this wider, much bigger cycle of memory, which is the Nakba, right? So the original loss in a way. And it all goes back to that, or people aspire for it to go. They want to return. So it's literally a cycle where they're trying to get back to where they started from. And in a way, I think this documentary is about these different cycles of memory and how they intersect, really, in everyday life. That's one of the most striking, I think, things about everyday life in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, in the West Bank, it is that memory plays such a crucial role in ways that it doesn't really in other places. I can't really, and it's something I keep thinking about. It's not as prominent here or in other European countries or in the States.
And it's like memory is a tool of resistance, right? And even though Israel has the balance in their check with military funding and, you know, it's so unjust the way that things work over there, they can never kill the Palestinian spirit. And to be alive or to rebuild your home that's been destroyed, to just do that act is to keep memory alive. And I think that was what the resistance was. But I find it's very hard to put into words because what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank is so awful, and it's not too strong a word to use things like extermination and these words that are very heavily historically loaded. But we hope our film can keep Palestinian memory alive. And that's what we're trying to do.